When I was a pension fund CEO, my friend Dave told me, "Tom, I'm 61, I've saved up 1.1 million euros over the years, and I'm just done. I'm done with the stress, I'm done with the long hours, I'm done with office politics. I want to paint, travel, and help raise my grandkids. So can I retire now and spend 5,000 euros a month?" The answer that I gave him goes against the most popular advice that you see online, and that's actually typical. Over my 2 decades in finance, including 4 years spent running a European pension fund, I've seen that most people misunderstand how much they actually need to retire, and this can delay their retirement for years. So here's the first thing I told my friend. If you can make early retirement work, go for it. Unless you really love what you are doing, retiring at 65 is often a mistake, especially if you have major plans for your retirement, like mastering a hobby or seeing the world. To explain the first reason why, let me share something I've never talked about before. 5 years ago, I woke up from a routine surgery and the doctor told me, "Tom, we almost lost you on the operating table." Turns out I had developed a dangerous arrhythmia while going under. Since that day, I've never forgotten the first reason not to delay our plans, which is that we simply don't know how long we've got left. And to understand the second reason, let's look at some data from Eurostat. You may be aware that at age 65, on average, you can expect to live for 20 years. And that seems like a long time, but that's just overall life expectancy. If you look at the average number of remaining healthy life years, that's not 20 years. It is just above 9 years. And that's the average. Any of us could have a stroke or heart attack or a bad fall that could prevent us from fully enjoying our retirement. So this is why I often tell my older students, those in their late 50s or early 60s, if you have big plans for retirement, and if the numbers more or less make sense, do consider retiring early. You can make money stretch if you need to, but you can't make time stretch. Now, when I told Dave all this, he said, "That's great, but I really don't want to run out of money when I'm 75 or 80. So I said, okay, let's do the numbers. Let's start with the standard early retirement advice, which is based on research from the 90s called the Trinity Study. Here's what those researchers found. Let's say your money is invested in a reasonable portfolio, like 60% stocks and 40% bonds, and you retire with amount X. If you take out 4% of X the first year after retiring, and then you increase the amount you take out with inflation every year after that, chances are great you will never run out of money. Because of this study, ever since the 90s, 4% per year has been the most popular safe withdrawal rate that people quote online. Now, the first problem with this is that the Trinity study has all kinds of limitations. It's based on just US stocks. It assumes you retire at 65, not early, and it assumes you will not reduce your spending in a market crash. Change any of these assumptions and your safe withdrawal rate could be anywhere from 3% to as much as 5% per year. That's why these days I teach my students a more flexible approach to planning their retirement spending. But 4% is a decent starting point, so that's what I used with Dave. I said, look, you've got 1.1 million. 4% of that is 44,000 per year, or around 3,600 euros per month. So this is how much passive income your portfolio could safely give you long term. Dave looked disappointed. He said, that's tight. I couldn't really travel on that. I told him, don't panic. We're not done yet. First, it's going to get worse, but then it's going to get better, I promise. So this 1.1 million, how much of it is money that you put aside yourself and how much of it is profit from investing? Dave said, I don't know exactly, but let's say it's half and half. So I said, okay, let's say 50% of your portfolio is profit and you have to pay tax on that. In our country, that's 20% on the amount. Effectively, if you're paying 20% on half of your money, it's like paying 10% on every withdrawal. Basically, instead of getting 44,000 per year, you would be getting 40,000 per year after taxes. So that's the bad news. Now, Dave didn't look too happy about this. He said, where's the good news? And I told him, well, you've just spent 35 years working highly paid corporate jobs, right? And for those 35 years, you have paid Social Security contributions. Now, as soon as I mentioned this, Dave raised his hands. He said, I see where this is going. You're talking about pensions, but I don't believe in pensions. Look at the demographics. The whole system is going to collapse. As a pension fund CEO, I really used to hear this a lot. And there is some truth to it. Here in Europe, society is aging. As the years go by, we're going to have more and more pensioners and fewer taxpayers. If Dave had been 30 or maybe even 40. I might have agreed with him. He couldn't really count on a significant state pension. But he was 61. The pension system is not going anywhere in the next few decades. Yes, there are risks. The pension age is likely to go up in many countries, like in Denmark, where it is now 70, and there are going to be other changes. But with many of my older students, I find that they worry too much about this. They become completely skeptical about pensions. And the reality is, unless we have complete revolution and anarchy in the streets, I mean, if you live in Europe and you're retiring in the next 10 years, you will have a pension. So I asked Dave, have you actually checked your pension estimate? And he hadn't. So we logged into the government portal and we did it together. And it turned out his estimated pension was 3,000 euros per month if he stopped making new contributions. So I said, okay. Now the math kind of lines up. You want to spend 5,000 euros per month, but you're getting 3,000 euros from your pension. So your investments only need to cover 2,000 a month. That's 24,000 a year, or 27,000 before taxes. So if we assume that same 4% withdrawal rate, you only need 675,000 invested to generate 27,000 of passive income per year. I mean, that's much more manageable, right? Dave said, yeah, but I'm not getting a pension until 65, maybe 67 if they change the rules. That's 4 to 6 years from now. I said, right. So the real question isn't, can you retire early today and live off your investments for the rest of your life? The real question is, can you retire today and bridge the gap to 65 or 67 until you start getting your state pension? And that is a much, much easier problem to solve. Dave asked me, how do I do that? Can I just take out 60,000 per year, so that's 5,000 a month, from my portfolio for the next few years? I said, well, you could do that, but then you've got to watch out for SUR. And he was like, SUR? What is that? I said, it's the sequence of returns risk. Basically, when you're investing for retirement, it really matters when the market goes up and when you have a crash. If you invest for many years and then at age 80, there's a massive crash in the market, most likely you're going to be fine because your portfolio will have grown and you will not have such a long time remaining, so you won't really be affected that badly. But if you retire early at 61 or 62 and you're taking out 6%, 7% of your portfolio per year, so these big chunks of money, and then the market crashes while you're doing it, well, suddenly, instead of taking out 6%, maybe you're going to be taking out 10% of your portfolio, right? Because you're taking out your 60,000 per year and suddenly the portfolio is much smaller and you just devastate your portfolio in just a few years because you got unlucky with the market. Dave said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm afraid of. I remember 2009. If that kind of crisis happens again when I'm 65 or 70, I'm screwed. I mean, there's no way I'm going to get a good job again. I said, okay, so that's the problem that we need to solve. And this next part is what actually let Dave relax a little bit. Here's what I told him. Instead of taking out 60,000 per year, which is really aggressive, you just need to bridge the gap for the next few years. And there are different ways to do that. So for example, you could use a bond ladder. If you need 60,000 a year, so adjusting for taxes, you actually need 66,000, right? Multiply that by 4 because you need to cover 4 years, and this is going to cost you 264,000 plus whatever inflation is. Instead of taking that money out gradually over the next few years, you could sell that much of your portfolio today, and then you can use the money to buy a series of safe, low-risk bonds that mature over the next 4 years. So these bonds would pay you 66,000 per year exactly when you need the money, plus a few percent per year in interest, which should hopefully cover inflation. With a bond ladder, you know that no matter what happens in the market, the money is coming in for sure until you reach pension age. Now, by the way, today I rarely teach my students about old-fashioned bond ladders. I teach using a ladder of bond ETFs instead, because right now you've got instruments like the iShares iBonds ETFs or the Xtrackers Target Maturity ETFs, which pay you back on a predictable schedule. That didn't really exist back when we were having this conversation, okay? So Dave said, that sounds pretty good, but I thought bonds are not very profitable. I mean, this is not going to make me a lot of money, right? I said, well, that's correct. So if you do this, the 264,000 is going to be locked up. It's not going to be making you much money, but what it buys you is the certainty that the money is going to be there for you over the next 4 years until your pension kicks in. Now, you don't have to put the whole amount in a bond ladder. You can do a mix and take a bit of risk in the market, but the basic idea is you're bridging the gap so you can retire early and not worry too much about being able to cover your expenses. And then with the rest of the money, you've still got 600,000 euros or more left over that you leave invested in the market. And by the time you retire, it will most likely be worth significantly more. It will almost certainly be enough to give you 2,000 per month in passive income on top of your state pension. Dave said, so basically you're saying I can do it. You're saying it's safe for me to retire. And I told him, well, there's always some risk, right? But I'm saying it's doable, especially if you're willing to cut your expenses a bit if the market goes down. Now, to me, it was very satisfying to see Dave physically relaxing, to see him sink back in his seat like this weight was coming off his shoulders. I could see him realize in real time that he was not stuck, that he had some options, that he could potentially quit his job tomorrow if he wanted to. Now, in the end, Dave actually kept working for another year, which I think was pretty sensible. He wanted to build a little more buffer against market shocks or the pension age going up. He also wanted to shorten the amount of time he needed to cover entirely from his savings. So he ended up retiring early with something like 1.3 million. But here's an important point. All the math, everything that we talked about, it only worked because Dave invested his life savings efficiently. He didn't keep them in cash or in some expensive product sold to him by his bank. So if you're thinking seriously about retirement, watch this video next. In it, I will walk you through the best way that I know to invest for retirement if you live in Europe.